Good morning. I'm your host, Jeff Sengfield, the Chief Technologist here at KeyCode Media, and I'd like to welcome you to Broadcast to Post, KeyCode Media's series hosting industry professionals discussing broadcast, production, and post-technology topics that you care about. Today, we're going to be talking about ransomware and security for media facilities. We're bringing together a panel of post-production specialists and legal advisors discussing the new security challenges faced by IT and media engineering teams at production companies. But before we get into it, a quick word on KeyCode Media. We're a nationwide broadcast audio-visual production systems integrator and reseller with over 30 years of engineering experience. We back this with our 24/7 phone, online, and on-site support plans, making sure that your solution is working all the time. And when it comes to keeping your facility secure, we can come up with a complete backup, archive, and cloud strategy to make sure your media assets are protected. Okay, let's prune the usual infomercial because we have a really important topic to get to. And frankly, time is of the essence when it comes to protecting against this threat. We have friends of KeyCode Media that were not prepared and have been gotten hit already. Their businesses are suffering. We must talk about this. Our friends need ways in mind to keep themselves safe in this new reality. Over the last few months, we've seen ransomware make headline news. Food supply chains, oil supply chains, even the federal government. At the same time, as I've said, we've had several of our own customers in the media and entertainment industry get hit with this, from just simply locking employees out of computers to malware finding and using the customer's own transcoding and render servers to even faster encrypt their data and keep them from using their content. We had, as a team, had to stop and think, how can we help media facilities and identify and solve these threats with the new types of challenges that are out there? And keeping in mind, even with perfect security strategy, there is and there will always be a way for hackers to attack companies. They spend their lives looking for and creating new ways to wreak havoc. So let's get into defining the types of attacks we've been seeing. Two types of major attacks for ransomware against media companies are locker ransom. It's a type of malware that just simply blocks basic computer functions. For example, you could be denied access to the desktop while the mouse and keyboard are partially disabled. This lets you continue to interact with a window containing a ransom demand in order to make the payment and to use them for help. Apart from that, the computer is inoperable. But there is good news. Locker malware doesn't usually target critical files. It generally just wants to lock you out. Complete destruction of your data is therefore unlikely. This is typically browser-based, and the goal is to get access to your machine remotely. While it's seen everywhere, the elderly tend to fall for this. My parents did a while back. Then there's crypto ransomware. The aim of this is to encrypt your important data, documents, pictures, videos, but leave the basic computer functions alone. This is going to spread panic because users can see their files but can't access them. Media doesn't play. Projects are locked up tight. Crypto developers often add a countdown to the ransom demand. Pay this ransom by the deadline or all your files will be deleted. And due to the number of users who are unaware of the need for backups in the cloud or on external physical storage devices, crypto ransomware can have a devastating impact. Consequently, many victims pay the ransom simply to get their files back, or in some cases, get further demands and not get their files back. In media environments, we depend upon shared storage to facilitate creative collaboration. So one system takes down all the storage. And if you get a hold of a nice big GPU that you've picked up pre-COVID for rendering, it's going to be a supercar of encryption for your data. Now, let's look at the ways we can deal with these threats. There is prevention, which is always preferable, and remediation. What are the ways media companies can prevent attacks? Corporate-wide policies, firewalls, passwords, multi-factor authentication, email security, malware detection, and destruction. Keeping your networks air-gapped or separated, it's the usual low-hanging fruit. These are the common sense approaches to keeping the baddies out. Phishing attacks are not only common, but more sophisticated these days. We're past the days of overseas royalty begging you to help get their money back to this country. Today, things look like your bank, your friends, or anything getting you to open and click. Many times someone was just in a hurry and they become the incident point. So external media scanning, it's critical. A single computer that's not connected to your systems at all. All incoming disks and drives are scanned for threats before entering your environment. A large media company's network was hacked a few years ago by USB drives. They were left on the ground in the parking lot for folks to find. All it took was one person to think, ooh, freebie, and plug it in. Hackers will send you drives also with pretty packaging, with explanations as to why this needs to touch your computer. So you need to prepare also for remediation. Backup and archive strategy. One core piece of most crypto ransomware is to locate your backup servers and services and try to infect and delete them first. How you archive and keep your archives and backup safe is critical. If it's on your prem, how is it safer than your primary infrastructure? Is just having copies in the cloud enough? How about snapshots of data? Some of these methods are variants on what you use today for backups, for hardware failures. Just with some planning and hardening of systems, we can make this work for you. Response plans. Do you have a plan in place for an attack? What your initial actions are may determine if you're going to get past this quickly and with the least amount of downtime. Have you sat down with all of your internal departments to work out a plan? You cannot over-communicate here. Shooting from the hip here is going to stoke the chaos. Getting the plan off the shelf and implementing it is where you want to be. And if the data you work with isn't owned by you, what level of care and custody is needed with the assets that someone else owns? All right, enough of Jeff's doom and gloom. Let's talk with our experts. We're bringing together a panel of ransomware and security experts to discuss what media companies can do to protect their assets. We're going to talk about the terms, the types of risks organizations like yours are facing, and what best practices can be implemented across your enterprise or maybe just in your business unit. And then what steps you can take for prevention, and what steps to take to be ready for recovery if the unthinkable happens. After my initial questions, we're going to be getting to all of your audience questions. Please submit those at any time on YouTube, Facebook, or the Vimeo embedded landing page chat. Let's get to our panel. David Boland is the Senior Director, Product Marketing for Wasabi. As Wasabi's Senior Director of Product Marketing, David plays an integral role saving data simple, fast, and secure. He has served in various sales, marketing, and product management roles at companies at all stages of growth, from startup to Fortune 100, including NetApp, Juniper Networks, Lucent Technologies, and Cabletron System. He'll be giving us a cloud storage perspective. Tridib Chakravarty, President of StorageDNA, TC. TC has extensive knowledge and technical expertise of the storage and archiving industry. He's responsible for the overall strategy and vision of StorageDNA's product line of hybrid, cloud, LTO data management solutions for production, post, and broadcast environments. Prior to founding StorageDNA, he was responsible for mapping new strategic initiatives for Quantum's Advanced Technology Group. TC also participated in the development of Quantum's deduplication and continuous data protection product lines. Diana Salazar at Quantum. Diana is the product marketing manager for the enterprise backup and archive portfolio at Quantum. She's the subject matter expert responsible for messaging, strategy, and execution of media security solutions. Diana also represents Quantum in the LTO consortium. Brian Cabrera serves as Chief Legal and Compliance Officer at Quantum Corporation and is providing us a legal perspective today. So put your lawyer hats on. He most recently served as Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Criminal Division of Northern California's Federal Prosecutor's Office, charged with investigating and prosecuting federal crimes. He was also the Senior Vice President and General Counsel for NVIDIA, a Fortune 500 company synonymous with graphics, autonomous driving, and artificial intelligence. He's responsible for a global team of some 150 employees and staff, all handling legal, compliance, cybersecurity, physical security, and governmental and regulatory matters for Quantum. All right, let's get started with our legal advisor, Brian. Hopefully we can set the tone for the risk businesses are facing and give some quick guidance on what to do in an attack. Just a disclaimer, Brian's providing his opinion today. This is not considered to be legal advice. Brian, with your experience at NVIDIA, the US DOJ, and now at Quantum, how do you approach security from an attack prevention standpoint when you join an organization, especially companies that are likely big targets for these types of attacks? We're even seeing some organizations hit with negligence lawsuits after an attack. Any type of insurance policies out there that cover organizations for these sorts of things?
Sure. In the old days, 8 years ago, you saw these threats coming in from, APT threats where somebody in China was going to work every day and, with a coat and tie and looking to, over the course of years, spy on our operations. And I think the difference now is you see this everywhere. I think, Cybercrime Magazine just came out saying these ransomware attacks are every 11 seconds in 2021. And it's been promulgated even further by the fact that you've got, the COVID-19, people on home networks, people working remotely. So when I go into an organization, I think really the first thing I look to do is make sure we're doing an outside assessment of not just the IT resources that we might have looked at before, but across the entire organization, and putting together, really an incident response plan that can be very complicated, very involved, and take some time to do. So it's important for organizations to develop those, and it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, right? You may be a small contractor or a vendor to larger companies, and you've still got to be concerned about that with your network. And as the former FBI director said, at this point, it's not if you're going to get attacked, it's when. Everybody should be looking at this as something that is really likely to happen in the not too distant future. You're not just seeing it from the Chinese or the North Koreans. You're seeing it from organized crime. You're seeing it from Eastern European gangs. And so it's also become a lot more chaotic, if you will. So that plan has to take into account a lot of the different vectors and specific to ransomware. And then obviously working on policies internally to understand the front end. How are you helping prevent employees from responding to phishing emails and the like, and the back end? What kind of backup, what kind of systems, what kind of segregation of systems are you looking at? Similar to a submarine, that you'd be, compartmentalizing some of the data so that if there's an attack, it's not all sitting in the same place, or it's not all exposed to the network. So having that separate is important. And then obviously there is insurance, but as you can see from just reading the front page of the papers, the numbers are getting enormous. $40 million in the recent insurance amount, $4 million at Colonial. Average demand for a ransomware attack is $750,000. So you're talking about very large sums of money here. And then as we all know, with ransomware, the scary part about this is you also have the destruction of data, and you have the exfiltration of data and the publication of data and information. So the costs to an organization are enormous. And the insurance companies are getting a lot of claims, and you can get insurance for it. And one should look to see what the insurance looks like, what the rates are and the like, but the rates are going up and the coverages are going down. And so it's really crucial, I think, that people have a plan in place, an IPL in place, as I mentioned, have the contacts in place up front. Even having the IPL security firm on retainer is something that I do just to make sure that when you get that call, you're prepared.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So that's the prevention side. So what do you do when an attack happens? Should companies contact the authorities right away? Is it even legal just to pay the ransom off, or is that not recommended? What are the options people have when the unthinkable happens?
Yes, the options can be very limited, right? Because you're talking about something that, if depending on how much data they've exfiltrated, you don't necessarily know when you start off whether they're capable of completely shutting down your business, or if it's just one sector. So obviously, first call is having that incident response plan and enacting it. Frankly, you need to make sure that incident response plan is in hard copy, because as you could imagine, our immediate reaction might be, hey, let me email our IT. They may be monitoring all of your communications. If they've captured that, things happening, a backup plan that allows you to communicate outside of your normal communication channels, text or email or whatnot. So you really need to make sure that that plan provides for and has been practiced ahead of time. I think in terms of contacting the authorities, I think it's a good idea in general to be in touch with the FBI or the Department of Homeland Security. And I would generally think that for most companies, especially for larger size companies, you already want to have contacts you should already know who your FBI contact is, for example, and be able to contact him or her immediately to have a conversation. There's also groups that you can join. IC3 is a group that you can report to the FBI and explain what has happened, and they can help sometimes aggregate the victims together in terms of their investigation. Sometimes they can get it recovered, as we saw recently. But keep in mind that going it on your own to pay ransom, a few things there to kind of factor in. One, a lot of the insurance companies are not fans of that and will not write policies where you're going to do that. The American laws are coming into play to restrict that, because potentially if you're making a payment to a foreign entity or a foreign national who's on our restricted list, you could be violating American federal law by doing so, by making that payment. And then the other practical realities are, the statistics show when you make those payments, you don't always get your data back. If you get your data back, it's not always unencrypted, and they're not on any kind of time frame. Your business may be down and you need to move tomorrow, and they may not get your data back to you for months. They're not on the same wavelength, obviously, as you, and don't necessarily care. And then lastly, the statistics are showing that for some of these companies that pay, often are the same companies that get hit again, and often by the same bad actor. So I think one needs to be really careful with their response in that situation.
Awesome. So oftentimes media companies are working on projects they don't even own. The data is someone else's. So you got to say, for instance, a trailer house working on TV spots for a Disney movie. How can companies protect themselves from those liability issues, but also make a large media customer feel safe using their services without getting hacked? Brian, can you take lead on that, and then anyone else chime in afterwards?
Yeah, I think first off, for those situations, I think even if I were a smaller company trying to that service larger companies as you've described, I would make sure that I had the same kind of process internally that I could show them. Lots of the larger companies now are requiring their vendors, their consultants, and the like to have these types of things in place, to have proper authentication methods, proper policies. And I think if I were able to go with policy in hand, with an incident response plan in hand, as I go and contract with those organizations, I think I'm in a much better situation to be dealing with, whether it's the IT folks, legal folks, or security folks, to be able to walk in the door with, we're well prepared for this. We train our folks on this. We have an incident plan in place. we have somebody on retainer that, if this happens, we're going to be protecting your most valuable data and your most valuable assets.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Any other thoughts on that from anyone?
Right. Just to add on to that, it's for, we understand that in this industry, there's a lot of the organizations work with several different post houses and several different people. There's a lot of collaboration going on. They could be collaborating with very small organizations, and it's very difficult to be able to understand what sort of data protection security strategies they have in place. But I think the most important thing that these organizations can do is the behavioral approach. Really, it's implementing the most you can do for your data protection, privacy settings, endpoint securities, that sort of thing. This is the kind of thing that the regular Joe can do if they are in smaller houses where they're collaborating with everyone. It's a little bit of cyber hygiene that has to take place.
I agree with Diana. She said everything exactly what I was going to say. However, and it's usually often, I shouldn't use it, but it's very often that third parties are the conduit into a company's data center. So if you outsource anything, it could be backup, and it could be MSPs, it could be a ton of people who you maybe outsource to. Years ago, Target was hit in 2013, and Target was hit through their HVAC outsourcer, the folks that were responsible for turning the air conditioning and heating on and off in their stores. Well, that was the conduit to Target's credit card customers. So you have to be very careful with third-party access to your networks, because you may think that you've locked down your network, but the bad actors could be targeting the third party that gets access to your network.
That, I think, also gets to the compartmentalization that was mentioned earlier, making sure that the section of the network that reaches the HVAC control system isn't on the same network that is access to credit card data or is access to production data in this kind of case. All right, let's transition to the more technical part, because we've got folks from cloud, backup storage, and file management providers. Media industry can be a different beast sometimes. Media can be located on shared storage, SAN or NAS. It's got a file system. It also could be in cloud storage, tape, or even in some of the consumer tools out there on the cloud like Dropbox. Would you think that pro video environments are more or less prone to ransomware?
Yeah, I can sort of comment on that. I think, from some of the articles I'm reading, media industries are, about in the middle in terms of ransomware attacks. And percentage-wise, I think it's within 5 or 10% of every other industry. But one of the things I'll hit upon is a lot of clients believe that, or end users believe that, if your data is in the cloud, for example, Dropbox or a Google Drive, that it's well protected. And unfortunately, when you get hit by ransomware, ransomware looks at any mounted file system. So if it sees a Google Drive or a Dropbox, it's going to encrypt that as well. And yes, you have things like snapshot protection, but it could still be quite problematic to get your data back. So one of the things I like to highlight is, just because it's in the cloud, it doesn't mean it's protected. You got to look at the right type of cloud storage, things like object locking, to make sure that your data is truly protected from ransomware. So, while I don't believe the video industry is any less or more susceptible, I think there is this false hope, especially in technologies like a Dropbox or Google Drive, that can save you from ransomware. And we tell a lot of clients that they may not be the case, and you need to take a closer look at these technologies. So,
yeah, I'm sorry, Dan. But yeah, TC is again right. Everything you said. I see OneDrive, Google Drives, Dropbox. Those are consumer grade products. I don't think they're designed for enterprise. Yes, they encrypt everything that they have in the data center. That protects them from a data center side attack. But in the case of a bad actor coming in through the network, either accessing those drives from on-prem storage or from your email administration, they can get access to whatever you have in those drives really quickly.
Yep.
So it's probably, I would say it's encrypted and safe from a data center access perspective, but it's pretty open from anyone trying to access that from on-prem or through a VPN.
Right, and I was just going to add that I see the media and entertainment industry as a big ticket item, and I think that's the mentality with these criminals, is that if they have the budget for these multi-million-dollar, projects, then they are going to have the money to pay up for, in case when they hack. And so unfortunately, that is the reality, and that could be the same mentality across any industry. But they know that there's a lot of collaboration going on. They know that there's maybe the security of this data is a little less, maybe they lax a little bit more than in some other organizations. But I just, just to differ a little bit, but of course, in line with what everybody's saying, I do see it as a big ticket item for these organizations to go after. Not necessarily that they are more vulnerable, but in some cases, because of all the collaboration they're doing, they could be a little bit more vulnerable.
The other thing also I've seen is where you actually can have two victims. So a small production house is working on something for a much larger production company or a studio, and the small production company doesn't want to be caught, having let everyone in the front door. So they pay for it, but then the criminals realize the bigger pockets are over there. I'll ask them. And that happened with a streaming show a couple of years ago. And the streamer said, okay, you're going to release 6 hours of our content. What is everyone going to watch for the rest of the month? Go for it. So that's the thing that I think it's a little interesting. And also I spoke to someone who was there at basically a TV network that was at the beginning of a ransomware attack, and the first thing they noticed was all of their systems suddenly went to maximum GPU and net maximum CPU because they were leveraging all the power of these production systems to do the encryption. They were using their own tools against them. Let's get into the different parts of systems out there and how they can be addressing protection. TC, SDNA Fabric. Your product has a lot of file and media management tools for active and archive media. Let's begin with how your organization is approaching ransomware and data protection.
Well, firstly, thanks for having us, be part of the panel. And yeah, with Fabric, we're really helping clients get their data orchestrated between multiple sites and cloud, right? So we're getting data to cloud, helping them manage data within cloud. And part of that whole process comes down to backing up and protecting your data. And, in the last year and a half, part of that backup and protection drive and motivation has been ransomware, right? And so as we sort of peel the onion of how to protect our end users' data, what has also sort of dawned upon us is the traditional form of backup and protection doesn't quite map to ransomware well, right? So we walk into a lot of customers, and the ones that tell us they've been hit by ransomware, they were backing up their data, and they did end up paying the ransom even after they backed up their data. And we kind of start peeling the onion, you find out that the way ransomware attacks occur is the reason why this happens. So let's kind of map this. So let's say you get infected by ransomware on day one, and this software is pretty sinister. So it starts to encrypt your older data first, because you're less likely to notice if you are, having your older files encrypted. And as it's kind of proceeding to encrypt your data, let's say on the first day, the second day, your backup application runs. But now your backup application is starting to back up encrypted data in addition to good data that it needs to back up. And let's say on day 4 or day 5, your users start to notice that, hey, my files are unreadable. I'm trying to edit a sequence and my files are offline. And that's when kind of IT, gets called in, right? And the first thing IT notices is that, okay, we got hit by a ransomware, but they also start noticing the ticking time bomb, which is, hey, if you don't pay this ransom in a certain amount of time, you're going to lose all your data. Execs come in and the execs ask IT, hey, can you recover our data without paying the ransom? And generally IT says yes. But the problem occurs when they start looking at where to recover from. Well, there isn't one clean recovery point because every recovery point has some encrypted data and some good data. And with the clock sort of ticking down, it starts to become a bigger issue. Now, what can get even worse is if you decided to make a backup to a second target, which itself got encrypted, right? So, well, we kind of had to step back and say, yes, backing up is good, but it will not always save you. So, with Fabric, what we've done in the past few months is built in features like whitelisting, right? So whitelisting is an interesting feature which says that, let's say I'm backing up an Avid media workspace, right? It's got MXF files, PMRs, MDBs. Well, if you restricted the backups to only those file extensions, it would not pick up the encrypted data, right? So what you're now getting is backups, which are only your clean data. Another thing that we've noticed is when ransomware hits, your backup incremental percentage goes up. So if you kind of come in and say, okay, on a daily basis, I notice I encrypt about I back up 10% of my data. And on day 2, you suddenly find it jumped up to 25%. That could be an early warning sign that something is going wrong. And the third one is, that we tell all our clients, we rely on the backup medium, right? May that be LTO or object storage. You need to be picking a backup medium that's going to help you recover without itself getting encrypted. And the last sort of advice I would say is testing and having drills to make sure that you can recover, right? That is, I would say, one of the most critical things you can do in your organization is run recovery drills, run ransomware drills to see how you respond in your environment. So yeah, I think we're doing a lot of interesting things. We're releasing actually a blog next week with, a lot of these suggestions. So I would encourage everybody to kind of look through that blog. But yeah, that's what we've been up to. So
very cool. David, what are some of the cloud providers doing at the enterprise level to make media assets more safe? And what is the actual security level in the cloud?
All right, great question. And I want to just touch on something that TC mentioned earlier too. So there's a couple things from that I want to point out. Stuff like StorageDNA Fabric and some newer backup platforms have machine learning capabilities and anomaly detection. So like you said, if they're backing up usually 10% of the data on a weekly basis or daily basis or whatever, and then it starts to jump up to 15, 20, 25%, you can flag that, send that information to a storage administrator saying, hey, anomaly has been detected. You're backing up a lot more than you have previously. And that's a key indicator that something may be wrong. And that's something someone should definitely look at, because identifying the attacks as they're happening is critically important. From a cloud provider perspective, where Wasabi sits, we have features I'll talk about in a moment called immutable buckets or object lock. But those are more of a recovery option than a prevention option. So what would happen traditionally is when you do your backup and you send a backup, or it could be even your primary data or your archive data to a cloud S3 bucket, like a Wasabi bucket, you have the ability to turn on immutability. And immutability allows you to keep data in that bucket for a specific amount of time that you identify. And that data can't be encrypted by anybody else. It can't be deleted, altered, or changed. It can't be deleted, altered, changed, or encrypted by Wasabi, and it can't be deleted, encrypted, and changed or altered by the end user or the malefactor. It's there. So if you say, well, I need to keep this video clip for 7 years, and you want to store it for 7 years, and you put it in a mutable bucket for 7 years, it's there, and it's not going to be encrypted or deleted by anybody. In the case of backups, if you have been attacked and your backup data is in the cloud and in an immutable bucket or it's object locked, it allows you to recover that data that's in the cloud. And what I would do is I would recover it to an isolated recovery area. So isolated recovery environment that's air gapped from the rest of the network. So as TC said, you bring it back, you load it up, and then you could run, scan it for malware, scan it for other activity because it's offline. And then you may be able to find previous versions of backups or some incremental backup or some grandfather, father, son backup that's affected. It will impact your recovery point objective. So you may not get all your data back from the last 2 weeks, but somewhere along the line, you're going to find a backup that hasn't been encrypted, or at least you can take out the virus or malware. If you're talking to cloud folks, I think it's important you talk to them about object lock capability, which is immutability on an individual object basis. And so you can set a specific date of retention for each individual object. It could be 30 days, 45 days, 60 days. And at the end of those days, that retention time expires and you can do what you want with that. You can either set it again or delete it. Great for backup. If it is not backup data, but primary data, maybe it's primary video or it's your archive video, you want to keep that in perpetuity in storage. You can set that bucket to be, for that data lock to expire years away from now. So there are some features that you have in the cloud that offer you protection, but it's more along the lines of recovery options. Maybe it's a disincentive if someone accesses your network, finds that there's no way that they can either delete or alter or encrypt your cloud data. Maybe they go away, but for the most part, I would say cloud object storage provides a recovery option if you have in fact been hit.
Yeah, I just want to add actually something more that we, are ardent sort of fans of the whole object store is object storage does allow you to mount it as a file system as well, right? So the interesting that we've seen is when you do get hit by ransomware, one of the biggest fears is my backup copy good or not? And you may not have the time to perform a restore or find a good recovery point. However, what we've noticed is that because object storage gives you the ability to direct mount it, well, you're not going to use it in a production sort of way. What it does give you is a way to quickly verify, hey, are these files good? Can I directly use it in my application? And that can be the critical decision between, okay, we're going to pay the ransom or we're not going to pay the ransom. So I think that's, another interesting feature of, any object store with object locking, right? May that be a public object store like a Wasabi or a private object store like Quantum's ActiveScale.
So that also hints on one little thing there which hasn't been mentioned. That David said that people get in and look at they look at and they see that these backups are happening and they can't kill the backup, so they decide to go away. Before the attack begins, they've been in your stuff for a while, sometimes for months. That's what Sony discovered in their large hack a number of years ago. So prevention is a huge part in being able to detect the folks before even the ransomware part of it begins. Someone has to actually look at stuff and go, as a criminal, and go, is this worth our while to even go after? Diana, Quantum has the disks, it's got the tape libraries, it's got the local archive as part of the media facility. What is Quantum recommending for customers who are looking to protect their data?
So we are approaching this data protection in a multi-layer fashion because we do have the different tiers where users can leverage depending on the risk levels they want to take and how they want to be able to recover. So we have the first tier, obviously the fastest performing tier. You could keep your data in your SAN, but as soon as it fulfills its value, let's move it off to a different tier. The data does not have to live there. Once you're done collaborating, once it fulfills its value, let's move it off. And that's where you could leverage the ActiveScale object storage, which is similar to what TC and David were speaking about, the importance of having that immutability. You can have you can implement versioning and different data protection strategies within that. You could call it active archive. So it's basically a cloud solution on-prem, right? You have that object storage capability with immutability, but not only that, there's another tier that is the lowest cost tier, and that is tape. A tape library has an inherent nature to air gap. And so it is highly recommended to be able to keep a copy offline, airtight. Ransomware cannot attack what it cannot see. And so when you are able to maintain a copy offline, you can rest assured that that data is going to be secure. Likewise with immutability within an object storage. And so our approach is a multi-tier. And what we're encouraging users to think about is to look at their backup strategy holistically. Leverage the lowest cost tier for your long-term archive. So you can not only keep it for long-term, but you can remonetize on that at a later time. The shelf life on those cartridges are about 30 years. And so there's different techniques and methods that you can use, but we always go back to the old backup rule of 3, 2, 1, 1. 3 copies of your data, 2 forms of media, 1 offsite and 1 offline.
Awesome. And if you're even a little more paranoid and you want to get into disaster recovery,
Right.
1 in a geographically distinct area, the other
Yes.
side of the country, perhaps. So interestingly, you mentioned the concept of air gap. I used to live in facilities where my job was to make sure that certain things were air gapped. One of the problems I would run into is I'd sit down at a system that's a delivery system and realize you're connected to my shared storage and you are connected to the internet. What the heck are you doing here? So a lot of preventing these attacks comes down to proper training of your people. How have you seen media or IT departments approach their staff to help combat these sorts of attacks? What types of training and best practices do you offer as well? Make sure that people don't have a user and a password of intern. Let's whoever wants to jump in on that.
I'd say, engage your professional services team, definitely. If there's any question with how to implement and what a best practice should be, engage with them. They know, they're keeping up to date. They know their solutions and they can give you a best course, of action in order to limit your risk. But essentially that's what it is. It's engage with your professional services team.
TC, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Also, I think, also I believe that, I'm going to go back to the original statement, right, which is it's not whether you're going to get hit, it's when you're going to get hit, right? So while I totally believe, yes, best practices, training your employees, telling them not to open that email or clicking on that link that they don't know where it came from, despite all of that, you're going to get hit. And I think that's kind of where the best practices of drills and making sure that, at least once a month, you're able to create a mock environment and go through the drill because, you want to be ready when you get hit. So I would say that's a critical part of your overall ransomware protection strategy as well. So.
And I want to add one more thing. Sorry, David, but I want to add one more thing. And TC just mentioned it. It's so crucial as part of this, implementing a ransomware protection strategy to think about preventing. That's the best solution we have right now. Nobody has a solution that can stop ransomware, but we can certainly prevent it. And so when you look at things and understand your threat landscape, understand your risk profile, and you're able to identify the possible entry points. Your weakest link is as strong as you are, as they say, right? You are as strong as your weakest link. So we've got to be able to look at our threat landscape, reduce our attack footprint. And like TC said, training and testing and all these steps that need to be taken prior to implementing that or part of the ransomware strategy that is being implemented. We cannot be lax about that. This is the best way we have to prevent ransomware, and that is to look at every angle and look at it holistically to be able to prevent it in the first place.
Yep, absolutely right. And I just want to point out again, TC, great job on mentioning practice restores earlier. If you are in the business, you ought to be doing a practice restore at the minimum quarterly. You know, do you have how long does it take you to restore? What are the resources involved in the restore? What's the cost of the restore? And can you improve on how fast you do that? Or can you improve on the cost, or can you minimize the resources? As Diana said, if you've got your backups on LTO tape, you're golden, right? And take it, bring it to your isolated recovery environment. See how long it takes you to get that up. If maybe it's in the library, or maybe it's in Iron Mountain, or somewhere where it's air gapped, how long does it take you to get that back? How long does it take you to get it up and running? If your backup is in the cloud and it's in an immutable bucket, how long does it take you to get that data out of the cloud and to your isolated restore environment? And what's the cost associated with that? If you've put your backup into AWS, Azure, or Google, all three of them whom charge you to get your data back, you're going to have a cost associated with every practice restore you do. And in times of critical necessity, if there is a ransomware issue and you have to do a restore from an immutable bucket in the cloud, what's it going to cost you to get back 100 terabytes or a petabyte of data? And is that in your budget? And obviously, I bet you haven't budgeted egress charges for a petabyte of data for a practice restore, right? So keep in mind where you put your backup, what the cost of it is to get it back, and how fast you can get it back. It's with Diana and Quantum and LTO, it's a truck drive, maybe, right? If it's on site, awesome, air gapped, awesome. If it's in AWS, Azure, or Google, you're talking hundreds, possibly thousands of dollars for a practice restore just to egress a copy of your data that's there.
And Jeff,
Actually,
I just piggyback on top of that, and from my vantage point is, you should really have identified as forensic and security resources and providers ahead of time. You should know what their numbers are, and they shouldn't be on your system. They should be, under your pillow or in your glove compartment of your car. You should have that plan available. You should have the crisis resource management resources available, and know that, and then know your contact, your law enforcement folks. Get to know them. They're open to this. The government is taking a tremendous interest now in this area, knowing that it is having such a huge impact on business, on all our businesses, right? Not just the M&E environment, oil and gas and banking and whatnot, pipeline. So the government is much more actively looking at putting laws in place and being more proactive about working with private individuals and entities to try to go after these folks and to prevent them.
I just go ahead, Diana.
I was just going to say that, sorry, TC, but I was just going to say that if you have users leveraging LTO technology, that's one of the things that Quantum has done. We've gone out and we've talked to our users, and what we've done is, David was mentioning, if you're using LTO, then it's a truckload. What we've done is remove that complexity. In our tape libraries, as far as I'm concerned, it's still the only library that can do this. We've implemented new security feature called Active Vault. And it's basically in-library vaulting, so that you don't have to send data to an Iron Mountain or to another location. That's an on-prem library that vaults your tape, and that partition of the library is completely invisible to the backup application. So that's just another security feature that we've added to remove complexity. Now, that doesn't resolve the fact that you still have to send your data offsite. That's where the cloud comes in. Now push your data offsite, put it in the cloud. But if you get hit by ransomware, then you have the ability, and all your network connected devices are compromised. Now you have the ability to restore from tape, and you don't have to wait for that truckload. You can initiate the recover process right there and right then.
Right.
You think-
Yeah, just to kind of add to what Dana was saying earlier, is the 3-to-1 mandate, right? And I would say a few years ago, well, while everybody desired 3-to-1, it wasn't, very easy to execute. When we talk to a lot of clients now, we take a combination of object storage and LTO, right? Most object storage platforms, both public and private, have geo distribution spreading, right? So they can take, you write to object store once, but it makes 2 copies for you, either on-prem or in the cloud or across 3 sites, right? So we're getting to a place where now the 3-to-1 vision is achievable pretty easily. And when you take a combination of object store, LTO, you have 1 on-prem air-gapped copy. You put in an object store, you have a multi-location backup. I think it's inexcusable to not have a 3-to-1 going forward, right? The technology is there, the prices and the costs are there. And I think every organization, mid, small, or enterprise, can afford a 3-to-1 backup. And I think that's kind of essential, to keeping these attacks at bay and recovering from them, frankly.
Awesome. So a couple interesting points were hit on there. They're into all of your network devices. It probably also includes your security system. They're sitting there watching, oh, we've triggered the event. Watch the guy in the red shirt. He's going to go do X, Y, and Z. They probably have an idea also what your response processes are going to be. So like it was mentioned before, don't keep those in your systems. Have them in hard copy on the outside. So let's get into a few of our audience questions. Cliff is asking, are standard off-the-shelf protective software, is that enough? Or do you need a custom defense to be fully adequately protected?
Yeah, so I think, there are a lot of off-the-shelf prevention software solutions out there. And I think they're always trying to play catch up, right? They do offer a certain level of protection, but, the ransomware, creators are constantly trying to outsmart the software vendors and the protection vendors out there. So is there should you be deploying, endpoint protection? Absolutely. Should you only rely on endpoint protection? No, right? You still have to figure out what would happen if you do get hit by ransomware. Do you, have the right backups? Can you recover from them? Pretty much everything we've captured. So I think it's a dual strategy that you need to employ.
Definitely. Any other thoughts on that?
TC covered it, but I would think that everybody should have an ability to find and locate maybe scanning software, network scanning software that's been placed on your servers. Because when somebody comes in and starts, they get access first. If they get access to your network, they're going to put a scanning device on a network server so they can figure out exactly what resource you have, what applications you have, where everything's located. So find a way to mitigate that by finding scanning software, for your network. 2, they'll try to deactivate or disable your antivirus software. So if you see something going on your antivirus servers, there's an issue. So I guess that what I would say is there are software, off-the-shelf software products out there that can help you understand when you are being attacked and when they get access to your network. It's not if, it's when. And the faster you find it, the faster you can figure out, oh, I got scanning software and I've got someone disabling my antivirus. You'll know what to do.
I just want to add another angle to this, and that is that the criminals are using artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? In some cases, these are off the shelf. Now, what that means is we need to learn to master the tools that we do have, because if we don't learn to master them, somebody else is going to do it for us. And that usually means a criminal. And so whatever off-the-shelf software you can implement today, use it, master it, implement it, and leverage the heck out of it, because if we don't do it, obviously someone else will.
Definitely. And one of the things also is master the best practices and make sure they're followed. So if you block scanning software, because you know, engineering normally goes in and says, okay, can I reach this thing? And I'm going to ping, but you turned off ping. So they'll turn it back on and then someone doesn't turn it back off again. So making sure that you follow all those practices throughout, I think is the best method there. Bob, and then there was another person asking kind of the same question. What are the attack vectors of an air-gapped network? Can an infected file ingested in an air-gapped network encrypt data?
You know, there is a couple answers to that. And here is the importance of why you need to have prevention and other prevention methods other than just air gapping. It's important to look at it, like I mentioned before, have a holistic view, right? Implement your antivirus, implement everything you possibly can. Once data is copied over to an air gap, and I'm speaking about, you know, the tape, obviously the tape library is air gap. Really, the software is going to determine, the software that is implemented is going to determine if something is infected or not. The tape library doesn't have the ability to do that. So that's why there's, you know, protection has to come in layers. And so when they say the vector, yes, there's a possibility that data can be infected. But once that data is on that cartridge, for example, it doesn't have the ability to move to other tape cartridges unless it is inserted into the drive, right? To the actual, you know, drive. And so it may have the ability to infiltrate, but it's concentrated on just that one cartridge. And so again, the importance of having several layers of security in order to avoid that to begin with.
And yeah, what I just want to add is, is when you do have an air gap network, I think that's absolutely one of the defenses against ransomware. You know, if you're talking a post-production environment, having your edit bays, your shared storage on an air gap network with no internet access is a great line of defense. But let's say somebody puts in a USB key and the ransomware or malware travels through that, it will absolutely infect and encrypt all your data, right? So I think, again, best practices, you know, can be sticking USB keys into your networked air gap machines. So it doesn't, you know, make any sense to have your network air gap, but letting people move drives in and out of your machines, right? So I mean, again, it comes down to protocol. It comes down to best practices. It's much like a virus, right? You know, like COVID, right? It's constantly trying to find its way and infect your systems and masks, right? It's kind of a similar idea, right? Yeah. Is you're constantly trying to build that air gap and best practices to prevent it from hitting your systems.
Mm-hmm.
And maintaining that air gap, because I used to live in this world where we had stuff coming in. It's an air gapped environment, got to keep this data safe. And the air gap definitely kept data from ever being exfiltrated. No one could get a hold of, you know, something that was a critical plot point in a particular show. But the thing there is, you know, setting up, okay, something's come back from, the drive has come back from VFX. Yes, it's our drive, but needs to go into the vault and someone needs to scan it and make sure it's all clear before it comes back. Because the other thing also I discovered, I would send out things as MAC formatted and I'd get the same drive back as exFAT, which means that my protection methods had just been ripped out. Even the encryption in transit or the locking in transit was removed because their systems couldn't deal with it. A lot of it is making sure that your people are following these processes regardless of what the production deadline is. Because a lot of times it'll be, oh, well, episode 2's gotta get out the door. And episode 2's not getting out the door if everything gets encrypted. Follow the process, always trust the process. And if things are gonna be a little late, communicate that, you know, making sure people know they're safe.
And I think it helps to have a marshal, right? I mean, everybody's gonna hate that guy, you know, but that's the person who ensures that, no matter what, you follow the best practices. So
Yeah, and Jeff, you bring up a very, very good point. It's behavioral at that point, right? And if we're going to be successful in preventing ransomware in our organizations, then unfortunately, human nature does get in the way, and we need to come between that if possible, and make sure that we follow process, we follow best practice. Yes, it might take a little bit longer to verify things, and it might be counterintuitive, but to prevent ransomware from causing more damage, we need to start implementing those best practices.
Just to add, we should have an isolated recovery environment. So if you are hit and you do bring your tape back or your data back from the cloud, you can stage it in an air-gapped network environment where you can find what files have are causing the problem. Often these ransomware attacks are driven real time by a bad actor who has an application and he's sitting on the network and access to that isolated response area. Then you can go in and clean up what you need to clean up.
Definitely. So some interesting questions coming in here. Drew is saying, I absolutely disagree that any organization in our industry can afford 3-2-1 backups. On the contrary, we're talking about hundreds of terabytes. Even if we can afford the storage, time to restore is many days. Someone else says, I agree with Drew. I have 200 terabytes of media being LTO7 drives. That's about the best we can do here. And then Sebastian saying, how can 3-2-1 backups be achievable for 200 terabytes worth of ongoing project data without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars? And before you all start, I start thinking of what does my car cost and how much am I paying in insurance? Go.
I'll jump in there real quick. I can't speak for everybody's financial capabilities, but there's nothing lower cost than LTO tape. Right, LTO store a ton on that. Diana, fantastic job to Quantum for marshaling that through the system. LTO9 is awesome, and it's I'd say dirt cheap, right? And from a cloud storage perspective, if you're storing stuff in AWS, Azure, or Google, and it's $23 a terabyte, yeah, I can understand how that can be expensive. But there are also lower cost solutions. In the case of Wasabi, it's $5.99 a terabyte per month. Right? That's it. And so it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars until you get to the petabytes. It's doable. And if you're going to do it on-prem and you're going to replace your NetApp or EMC equipment every 3 to 5 years, that's going to be expensive. So there are ways to do it. It's just it's ransomware. You've got to protect your business, and there's a cost of doing business these days.
And what else?
Go ahead.
Sorry, Dana, why didn't you go? Okay, all right. So what I'll add, guys, is we're not talking about, the first point to kind of keep in mind is we're not talking about taking your entire archival footprint and making a 3-2-1, right, which would be great, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about protecting your active data from ransomware, right? So this could be a footprint of maybe 30, 40, 50 terabytes of data, right? And we're not talking about your entire petabyte of data. So if you're talking about a 20, 30 petabyte, now that becomes a lot more manageable. Make an LTO backup on-prem, make an object backup, which has geo-spread distribution. Wasabi is a great partner. You got ActiveScale. What you could see is that we're not talking about huge sums of money. Now, once the project's done, well, now you've gone into archive. When you're going into archive, well, maybe you can just do with 2 copies, one on LTO, one in, public cloud, deep storage, Wasabi, Glacier, many options there. So I don't think what we're proposing today is a complete 3-2-1 of every byte of data you own, but what's active, what's important, and what you're actively sort of creating and producing. Yeah, Dana, if you want to add to that, please.
I was going to say that there needs to be a switch in our mentality here, because yes, when you said, Jeff, earlier, you buy your car and then you look at the insurance, right? The insurance cost. But in this scenario, we have to look at the damage ransomware can do. You could have loss of reputation, you could lose customer trust, and you can have a myriad of problems that follow that event. to the point where organizations and large studios may not be able to want to do business with you because you've been hacked so many times, or you've been, not following best practices and or even using the lowest cost tier there is available today, which is LTO tape. And it may not be feasible to protect all of your important assets, but it's you got to take a look at what is key work that needs to be archived, and you take that chunks of data or assets and content and archive it. You need to be able to do that in the lowest cost tier that is available today in order to protect your organization.
Exactly, because the thing is, okay, what is the cost? What was the cost to Larson Sound? They don't exist anymore.
Right.
Their business was destroyed
Mhm.
because of Windows XP that didn't have Windows XP Server that didn't have software updates. Sometimes the cost of not doing it is well more than you can bear.
Greater, absolutely.
So let's see here. Interesting. Brother Rick has a question. Can tape media be rented, or does it have to be purchased?
Yes, it has to be purchased because there is data that, it belongs to you and you want to make sure it's protected. Even if you try to erase it, it doesn't, I don't know. I wouldn't trust that. So.
Well, so you can buy it directly and you can rent it indirectly from Azure, because I think
True.
Azure Blob Archive is probably, they never, openly say it, but Azure Blob Archive is probably running on LTO tape. So that would be a way to rent LTO, I guess, today.
That's right, TC. Good point.
Yep. So there are ways to get that done.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting question here from Kevin K. Has anyone seen Mac systems get infected with ransomware yet? I've personally only seen Windows get hit, and usually old, unpatched systems.
I would say the chances of Mac are less, but it's not like it doesn't happen. And I think the bigger issue is you need only one system to infect your entire network, right? So if you have that, if you have 100 Macs, but somebody walks in with a Windows laptop, plugs into your network, and it finds its way into your network, it's going to start encrypting your data. So you just need one bad app. But
Yeah.
yes, I absolutely do think Macs are less vulnerable, but not completely invulnerable. So
Any Mac running Windows, you're definitely vulnerable.
And the thing there is always been just simply the larger attack surface. Macs are not as prevalent out there in the overall industry. If you are after this and someone wants to write it, they will do it and they will nail you. Remember a couple of years ago, there was a whole bunch of editorial systems failed one day because Chrome updated, and it blew away a whole bunch of stuff that allowed Avid systems to function because people had been not following best practices. On Macs, PCs weren't affected, so they can go after that attack surface just as easily. All right. So Brendan is asking, so it's recommended to scan any incoming drive. How long does that take for, say, a 1 terabyte drive?
I would say, this is, it's a tough one to answer, right? It all comes down to file sizes, file counts, the type of software you're deployed for scanning. That said, you should yeah, exactly. So I would say that said, you should still absolutely do it. I'm not sure if it's a helpful answer.
Well, one of the things also is someone says, oh, we need to have a computer to scan data that sits in the vault or sits out there and we always plug everything into it. Oh, there's that system it came out of service 2 years ago. Let's just get it and update its OS and off it goes. If you want some speed there, you buy some speed there. You can get a decent speed CPU to help out with that process to do that. The thing also, Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Jeff. No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The thing also with time there and understanding how long data is going to take to recover, some folks have said, well, if I've got 200 terabytes, I've got to pull that all back. What do you need to have the clients who are in for episode 14 able to finish their work today? How much data do you need to pull back for that? And how long is it going to take? And since the client is sitting over there in color 2 or edit 4, do you tell them to go home? Do you tell your editors to go home, but you keep your assistant editors in? So doing these test runs and understanding exactly what the time cost is going to be can A, make the process go a lot easier. And someone, client services just heads over to the clients who are in and says, I'm sorry, we're having some technical problems today. We're going to have to reschedule your session. And then they go and they talk to the producers and they take care of that stuff while all the panic goes on back in the machine room. So understand how long it's going to take.
Well, that's the conundrum that we're in today. Time is money. And unfortunately with ransomware, there needs to be a process to verify, but that's where time comes in. It requires time. It needs these assets and content, they need to be verified. And that's where a lot of folks are saying, well, like you just mentioned, what do I do? Is it going to take an hour? Is it going to take 2 hours? Meanwhile, what do I do with all these editors? Or what do I do with, all these people that are collaborating? And so we're in between a rock and a hard place right now when it comes to that. And so, there is no straight answer, but we do need to verify. We do need to take the time to scan. It just depends on how long, and that's a business decision.
Definitely. Any last thoughts? Because we are running short on time. Awesome.
I was just going to say.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, between all of these solutions that you see up here and all of these strategies that you can have in place, you have the flexibility. We need to change the mentality. We need to think about our company's reputation. We need to think about our customers. If we're going to retain their trust, then we need to follow best practices, and we need to implement, and we need to look at things holistically so that we protect not only our organization, but by extension, we're protecting them as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to what Dana said, that I think we're in a place where, we need to embrace some of these new technologies that are going to protect you, but it's not going to happen without best practices, and an effort, in your production and post-production pipeline to instrument some of these technologies. Now, technologies are getting better. We personally are thinking about, hey, can we build detection into when we're transferring the data, right? So we're obviously trying to stay ahead, but we need your cooperation, right? We need users to participate in keeping these threats at bay while, we try to stay ahead of them.
Help us help you.
Exactly. And it's not going to go away as long as we have cryptocurrencies and as long as we have encryption. It's going to be here. We have to do our best to evolve and identify threats and then mitigate them. And God forbid, if they are able to do work, then we got to figure out how to recover from them. So it's with us for as far as I can see, ever.
Right.
Definitely. And one last thing before we go. If someone gets into your network and they can easily tell that you are a media corporation, like, oh, hey, our corporate network is called this, that can be a problem. Sometimes you just need to go through and rebadge your Wi-Fi. People don't know you're there. Hide in plain sight. Thanks everybody for joining us today. If you need to talk about your security posture, your abilities to get back from a disaster, get back from ransomware, reach out to us here at KeyCode Media. We can hook you up with our friends from Wasabi, StorageDNA, and Quantum. We can get the right solutions in there to make sure you're protected and you've got that insurance level that can make your clients rely on you. Thanks for joining us today. Everyone have a great rest of their day.